How can you defend what Priti Patel did? She seemed to be operating a sort of freelance foreign policy, failing to tell the Foreign Office, failing to tell the Prime Minister, leading to enormous embarrassment and potentially diplomatically very sensitive.
Good morning, Susanna. Priti Patel is a great loss to the Cabinet, but I'm sure she will be back. She's a passionate advocate for UK aid, delivering aid to the most needy people in the world, and, by the way, protecting British taxpayers by making sure that aid really does get to where it needs to get to. Priti Patel, in her resignation letter, spoke about the standards that she fell short of in terms of transparency and actually coming out and saying, exactly what happened on her holiday in Israel, which, by the way, she paid for. And the Prime Minister, I think, acted correctly, in fact, in an exemplary way, by asking Priti Patel to come in on Monday, explaining to her the ministerial code, why she felt that she'd made a mistake. Priti apologised, but I think the feeding frenzy from many of your colleagues and, the BBC hiring a helicopter to follow Priti's motorcade or car out of Heathrow to Downing Street, I think created such a distraction, both for Priti in her own work in the Department for International Aid, but also for the government, that she felt she had to resign. And I think she's done the right thing. She will be back, I am sure of that.
But it's interesting you say that they've created the distraction. It was Priti Patel that created the distraction by going in the first place and conducting these meetings without telling the government, without telling her Prime Minister that she was going to be doing it.
Well, what we know is that Priti was on holiday, that she paid for. She did have meetings with senior politicians, but also with many charities in her sector, in her work. Many startups in Israel doing incredible work in Africa on turning deserts into foliage, purifying water. The Foreign Office did know whilst the trip was taking place, while the meetings were taking place, but they really should have known weeks in advance so they can coordinate, and that the ambassador could be with her, especially in the high-level political meetings. That was her mistake. She admitted that. She apologised for it. But obviously, further information was then produced that clearly made her position difficult, and she decided to do the right thing and resign because the government needs to focus. Today we've got the beginning of the negotiations with Monsieur Barnier and the EU27. These are big issues. The Prime Minister delivered a very important speech to the CBI, big business this week, which has been hardly reported. That's why...
Well, what a shame then that Cabinet Secretaries are doing so much to be in breach of the ministerial code, to distract the headlines. Joey Jones, you were a spokesperson for Theresa May last year. Nadhim Zahawi is a lone voice defending Priti Patel. I mean, for those people watching, scratching their heads, wondering, what she's done that has led to this situation. Can you clarify?
Well, I'm sure you're right that Downing Street will feel that Nadhim deserves a medal for going out and defending the ministers who've been finding themselves in hot water over the past few days, and particularly Priti Patel. I think that the concern for the Prime Minister now, looking forward, is that there was this massive hue and cry and circus over the past few days around Priti Patel, but she's not the only one under pressure.
Well, but partly it led to a situation where we saw our Prime Minister sit down with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, not realising that one of her own government ministers had already held talks with them.
And I think that anybody, and Priti Patel herself, must recognise that she really let the Prime Minister down in that regard.
Well,
because
potentially
that is...
humiliated the Prime Minister.
I think that is very, very embarrassing, but she did have the opportunity to come clean at that face-to-face meeting last Monday, and that was the thing, ultimately, that did for her by not being straight with the Prime Minister.
Joey, do you think if you'd been advising the Prime Minister, you would have said, you need to come out here, be very strong, and be seen to have sacked Priti Patel? Because as it is, Priti Patel's been able to resign.
I think for me, as a former journalist as well, I don't think that in Westminster anybody really cares about the semantics of sacking or resigning.
But in the wider world...
It's like football management, to be honest. I mean, people like to give them the opportunity to leave with some dignity, and I'm sure that given the state of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, it wouldn't necessarily have done Theresa May and her party managers any good to rub salt in the wounds of Priti Patel.
Theresa May is really acting very strongly on this, and she should be commended for this. Parliament should be a safe place for people to come to work, and others, journalists, to come and interview politicians without the fear of being harassed in any way.
Okay.
And I think Theresa May has actually acted in a very responsible way as far as that's concerned. Yes, of course, it's been a difficult time, but, you know, she continues to drive the agenda. We've got a budget on the 22nd of November. She delivered a big speech to big business in the UK for the CBI this week.
Yeah.
And, of course, the beginning of negotiations today in Brussels.
OK, let's go back to Joey, though. Joey, you've worked alongside her as a spokesperson for her. How will she be feeling personally? Because, as Nadhim Zahawi's sort of trying to illustrate, she's still pushing forward. She's trying to be as strong and as stable as she possibly can be in the face of mounting pressure.
Well, we know that she's somebody who feels a strong sense of duty. She has committed herself to the party to basically soldier on at the moment. I think she had an opportunity to step away, obviously, after the general election, which really did for her own personal authority within Parliament. She didn't do that. And given that the Conservative Party, senior figures in the Conservative Party, of course, have been scratching their heads over the summer, wondering if there might be a better option, some option that would allow the Conservatives to wield more authority. They clearly haven't found one, and so she's basically stuck there. But it's an invidious situation. Would she be feeling
vulnerable? Would she be feeling vulnerable as the speculation would
I think she's
suggest?
actually far less vulnerable at the moment because all the other people who might want her job have been demonstrated to be wanting. Whether or not, I mean, you might have to be crazy to want that job right at the moment, to be Prime Minister with all the Brexit negotiations and everything going on. But there are a few people sufficiently crazy to want to do it. But the party doesn't seem to want them in there. So she's actually, I think, reasonably, not a strong position, but she's in there for the longish haul.